Okay, so hi and welcome to the channel. So just a bit about who I am and why I've set up this channel. So my name's Phil, I use they, he pronouns, and I work in tech. I sell tech for a large company in the UK. I'm not going to say the name on the channel, but if you're in the UK, it's a big department store. Very famous for being partially owned by the people who work there, so probably know where I work. I sell tech on the tech floor, and I will be moving into the tech support team shortly, so that's who I am. The reason I'm making the channel is because I find a lot of people who come in to buy technology either don't know what they're looking for or are quite worried about buying tech, and there might be brand biases, which are always a bad thing. And there might be a tendency to speak to people that they will then reference as being my colleagues, and they're not. They are representatives of brands. And it leads to a lot of misunderstanding, and people don't always have the technical understanding to know when things are not true, and when they are being upsold to, or when they are being used to get rid of old stock, really. And I've been told that that's what I'm trying to do to customers before, and I'm not. The company I work for has a big policy on that we are trained to be the informed friend, so we are supposed to, we upsell as much as we downsell, to be honest, so we will give you what is considered to be good advice for what you need. So sometimes we're not advising you to buy something more high spec with more money, we're advising you to spend less and get something cheaper and more easy to use. So generally what this particular video is going to be, this is just going to be an introduction to what you need to do as a consumer. So I'm going to give you 5 golden rules on going in to buy technology, and then later on in other videos I will go into depth more about specific technology, specific types. So maybe I'll do a video on TVs, or I'll do a video on computers, or I might review specifically one TV or computer. A lot of the time we're not going to have it here. Very rarely we will, because I do buy a lot of tech myself, but we'll see how that goes. Yeah, so the first rule for buying technology is know when to speak to reps. So reps are people who don't look like they belong to the brand that you are buying at. So if you are buying at my shop, for example, we all walk around in black and white uniforms, and we have a green lanyard. If you see someone who is wearing a Samsung hoodie, or is wearing an LG hoodie, or they are hanging around the Apple table, for example, and they've got an Apple lanyard or something like that, they are a brand rep. So they are not working for the shop that you are going to. They work for that brand, and what they're supposed to do is they are supposed to be there to help the people who are staff. So if there are any questions specifically about how to use, say for example, an Apple Watch, and the staff know what the Apple Watch does, but they don't necessarily know how to set a specific feature up, you speak to the rep. They're also there to train the staff, so they will do training sessions where staff will be taken off of the selling floor and given training on specific products. But sometimes they tend to overstep and they push sell towards customers, and often the customers have the perception that they work with us, which they don't. So there are a few times where it is okay to speak to brand reps as your first port of call, but usually try to find somebody wearing the uniform of the shop, not of a brand, because they will be reps and they will try and sell you their brand, even if their brand is not good for you. So for example, in the shop I work for, we have reps for certain TV companies. We have a rep for Samsung. Samsung are very well known for TVs that are very, very bright. Now, the kind of customer that is good for is people who are either sizing down a TV, so they want a 43-inch, but what they really need for this distance they're sitting is something larger. So you would buy something brighter to compensate. Or if you have a room which is very, very bright, and there's nowhere in that room you can put the TV that isn't going to have glare onto the TV. But that means that these TVs are not for everyone. So if you are only buying from Samsung's portfolio, but you live in, say, a typical terraced Cardiff house, you may not need one if you want a TV of the right size. So you might not get the TV that's good for you. So basically, the only times you should ever speak to reps is if you are already set on a brand. So if you've already done the research and you know that Samsung's best for you, and you see someone in a Samsung hoodie, go and speak to them. or for more in-depth information on a specific branded product. So if you are speaking to a member of staff from the company you're buying from, so let's say you're speaking to a Currys representative, and then you see a TV you like specifically, which is Sony, and you want to know something more specific about how to set subtitles on a Sony TV, and maybe the staff member doesn't know, it's appropriate to ask the rep at this point how you would do that and to show you how to use some of the accessibility features on that TV. But not to let that rep follow you to the next TV you're viewing. So always make sure you know when to say thank you, that's enough, I'm going to go look at another TV now. Some reps will try to follow you, try to push you, and occasionally tell you lies as to why their product is better than the one you're about to look at. So never ever tell the rep what you're about to look at. And also for tech support on a product you already own. So if you have a Google phone, for example, and you are struggling to get something to work, you've been told it has a specific feature, but you don't know how to use it, and there's a Google rep in a store nearby, by all means go and speak to the rep. They will know how to do it because they have extensive training on those products. They probably won't try and sell you anything if they know you already own their products, because the best thing they can do is show you how to make best use of the product you've already got, because that will sell itself in a way. You will then feel comfortable with those products and you will go ahead to buy more of that brand. So they are happy at that point to give you an honest review of the product. And also, so second rule, know when to buy tech. So when tech releases, the prices are massively overinflated. I call them the dream prices. So they're priced in order to make people look at them and go, wow, I could never afford something like that. But then they bring down the prices of the older generation, and that is considered to be sort of a normal price. It's not, it's actually lower than it's ever been. But the idea is they want to sell off all of the older ones, and yeah, sure, they'll sell some of the newer ones to people with money that they want to spend, but most people, that's not going to be a good deal. For people who it's important to spend as much as possible and then brag about the tech they've bought, that's great. They've gotten exactly what they wanted. I bought a $3 grand TV and it was amazing. But that TV is going to be about $1.5 grand in a couple of months. As soon as they've sold off the old model, that one is going to be cheaper. So what they've done is they've made you start dreaming about something you can't afford, but it's not going to stay at that price. So you buy it on the first reduction, but the first reduction is still really expensive. But you've bought it then because it looks cheap compared to what it was. But they know what they're doing with this. So the best time to buy tech is to buy it when the new model has been announced but not released. When the new model is released, you see things like the price going up by 20 or 50 quid. Not enough that you then think this is expensive compared to what it was, but just enough that it looks like they're taking the mickey a little bit. So buy it when the new model's announced and not released, because it will still look good in comparison to the new model, even if they stick an extra £20 on top. So new announcement, buy the thing. New release, you've waited a bit long. If the TV or the phone or the whatever you're looking for is new itself, you're going to get an overinflated price. And flagships rarely go on clearance, so that's something to be aware as well. So if you are thinking, oh well, it's fine, even if it goes up a little bit in price when the new one's released, it's going to go on clearance eventually. Cool, but if it's a flagship, that might not happen. Flagships rarely even reduce. So they will hit a certain price that they sit at the middle of the year between releases, and they never go back down again. There are a few exceptions. So for example, if it's a phone you're looking at, they will occasionally be available through SIM deals with a phone. So the SIM companies buy up tons and tons of the flagships and then offer them on really cheap prices in order to get you to transfer to their company for the SIM. So you can get them like that. But if you want to buy a SIM-free phone, or you want to pay for it outright, you're not going to find them like that. And very rarely as well, there was a situation with a TV in my store recently. It was the Sony A80J. It's a fantastic TV if you can get hold of one. But it was a flagship for 2021, and then they continued to produce it as the one just below the flagship for 2022. So it did go on clearance because it's not the flagship anymore. But you do also get that occasionally with certain brands where they'll keep the flagship for another year. So you won't get it on clearance that year. You might get it the following. Yeah. So I've had to do this with my phone recently as well. So I bought my phone. It's the limited edition color of a flagship phone. So I've bought it on sale as opposed to clearance, because I know it's not going to, as soon as it goes on clearance, that color will sell out. Buy the best you can afford is my third rule. Best you can afford. It doesn't mean the most expensive. Sometimes the best you can afford is a good £100 cheaper than the next one. And you can afford both, but one of them is better and it's the cheaper one. not paying extra for certain features that will benefit you will degrade your enjoyment, and you will find yourself replacing the text sooner. So for example, if you take a lot of photos on a phone and you say, but I don't want something that I'm paying more for the camera, you will eventually get sick of the camera and you will buy a new phone. And you will buy a new phone probably before that phone is out of date. So you are spending yourself more money in the end. Rather than saving yourself a couple of hundred, you are now spending another 1,000 on a new phone before the old one has even stopped taking updates. I know because I've done this, but also I've seen people do it where they come in, they say, I want a TV, I watch sports on it, that's all I really watch on it, but I don't want to pay more for sports features. And I know you're going to bring the TV back, so I try very hard to convince you to pay a bit more for sports features, because it is important that you have something that you enjoy. And if that TV then comes back a couple of days later, or if you then choose to replace it in 3 years' time and you say, I don't like this TV, it looks really blurry whenever I watch sports, I can't see where the football's gone. Yeah, I can't really say you bought that on yourself because you didn't want to pay enough for it. If you have a budget, you have a budget, but being stingy gets you bad tech. Fourth rule, enjoy ecosystems but avoid brand bias. So it is okay to get into an ecosystem that you like and you find easy to use. However, do not be biased towards a brand being the best or being the worst, because brands do change. So it is important that you do kind of keep up with whether or not the thing that stopped you buying a brand because you had a faulty product is still the case, and people do review that as still being the case, and vice versa as well. If you are very much a fan of a certain brand, there is a tendency for certain brands to produce really, really high quality stuff. There's one that's done it quite recently with TVs. I'm not going to name them in this video, but they produced really, really high quality stuff up until about 2018, and now their quality has gone right downhill. But they have, because of that time where they were the best in the market, they have some really dedicated brand biased customers who will buy nothing else. And those customers are bringing their TVs back, and their TVs are breaking down, and we are frequently failing TVs off the shop floor that no longer meet safety requirements, so they're having to be taken off display. So don't stick to a brand because you've had it before and it's worked for you. Only stick to a brand if those same features are still being highly reviewed and it looks like they haven't changed much. So for example, I have a few brand biases. I will disclose them at the end of the video just so that you know which tech I use. It means I know more about those specific brands and that specific technology, but it also means that you can kind of make your own judgment on whether I'm being biased or not. And the fifth rule is know how to spot upgrades versus upselling. So I think I've already touched on this before, where I will try and convince people to buy a TV with specific features for watching sports, even when they've given me a budget that doesn't allow for that, because they're being stingy. Not because they haven't got the money, but because they're just not wanting to spend that. So that is not an upsell, that is an upgrade. Pushing you up to a bigger TV if you are sitting a bit too far away from the TV is not an upsell, that is an upgrade. Telling you need a better camera phone than the one you've currently looking at because the specific kind of photos you want to take. Say you want to take macro photos and that's all you want to take. Some phones are not very good at that and some are really very good at it. The iPhone 14 Pro Max has got a dedicated macro lens. And if that's all you ever take, you probably want a phone with a dedicated macro lens. So that's not an upsell, that's an upgrade. That's showing you something that will work better for you. Upselling is trying to sell you a TV that's too big for the space. If you want a TV that is 75 inches, purely because you think that's better than 65, it's not. And this is something that people in the industry really do want you to think, because it means we can sell more expensive TVs. I don't, because there is a certain point where you're not getting more pixels on that screen, they're just getting bigger, and it will look pixelated. So you won't get a better product. You will actually be downgrading. But it's more expensive. So you need to be able to spot that. Is somebody just trying to sell you a more expensive product because they get a bonus for selling? Or because they are on commission? Or because they're a rep and maybe they weren't dressed as a rep and you didn't notice them? So you need to be able to tell the difference between upgrades and upselling. My company, again, we get a bonus, but it's based not on our sales, it's based on our takings at the end of the year. So if I sell you an iPad and I sell you an Air, you don't need an Air, I've sold you an Air because it's more expensive and I think that's going to make us more money. And you can't make your rent at the end of the month and you bring it back. I've now lost 20% on an Air because we now have to sell that for 20% less because it's been returned. So actually I haven't made anything from my bonus because I have brought the company's profits down, not up. So that is not good for me, and that is a better way for companies to pay their staff, I think, than doing it on commission, because commission just pushes people to sell more and more expensive things, and you will find yourselves being upsold to a lot. But basically, if you are in a shop and you are, say, buying a TV and somebody's trying to push you up the sizes, but they haven't given a reason related to the distance that you're sitting at, or if they are trying to push you up to a specific type and they haven't given you a reason why, or if they just seem to be trying to sell you a bigger phone screen, even though you've already said you don't want a phone with a bigger screen, you want something smaller. These are all upselling. This isn't upgrading. This isn't trying to convince you of something that's better for you. So you need to be able to tell the differences. I get accused of upselling a lot when what I'm really trying to do is upgrade a customer's experience of their technology. But at the same time, I see people trying to upsell, and I know that that customer doesn't need that product, and I know that that customer is actually going to find that product just to be overpriced, because they're not going to get the most out of the features on there. But yeah, it's just important to learn the difference. And if you can find out from anybody what the policy on payment of the staff is and where pays commission, it's best to avoid places that pay commission. Even though it might seem like it's a really nice thing you're doing to get the staff a tip, they will be upselling to you. They probably aren't paid a lot on base rate, so it's a good idea to avoid those places. And I think that's it for my rules. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to disclose the technology that I use at home. So I have a TV downstairs. My TV downstairs is an old Samsung Curve. I didn't buy it, I sort of inherited it. It's the product of a blended home. So it wasn't mine initially. It's good. The TV I have upstairs that's mine, that came into the product of the blended home as my child, is a Sony, and I have a TV in the spare room which is also a Sony, which is 22 years old now, I think, and they do continue to be a really long-lived brand as well, from what I hear. So I do have a bit of a bias towards that particular brand, yes, so that is worth noting. Although I do review that on a regular basis as to whether they are still producing the same high quality technology or not. My phone is a Google Pixel 7 Pro. My previous one was a 3XL. I do have a bias towards them. The smart home in my house is all Google as well. However, I do recognise that they're not the best in the world, and that there aren't a lot of upgrades between each individual phone type, actually. And the best phone I've ever owned, I would say, was the 3XL, not the 7 Pro. My computer I built that myself, so that is a mix of parts, but it most heavily features Samsung and MSI. My laptop is a Chromebook. It is made by Lenovo, so again with the Google, but also Lenovo. And my tablet is a Microsoft Surface Go 3, which is another brand that I strongly recommend. Rep quite hard at work, but not because they're producing bad things and I just like them. Brands that I would definitely say I have a bias towards for no apparent reason, I would say MSI, definitely. They don't produce tech that's as high quality as I would like people to believe they do, and when I'm making my videos, I'll try and be honest about that. I just like them, and I've always gotten on with them quite well, but I have honestly never had an MSI motherboard that hasn't just gone kaput. So if I'm being honest, that is a bias of mine, not an informed choice. My watch is a Garmin. It's an old Venue, and I think that is probably just about all the technology that I use on a regular basis. So that is a little bit about the biases I have. So if I do make any biased comments, feel free to call me out on them. And also, if I miss out any things that are negatives of brands because you feel like I might have a bias about it, feel free to call me out on that, because the entire point of this channel is to clear up some of the biases that people have gotten, as well as to inform you how to buy technology. What I'm probably going to do now is just give you an idea about something I don't like, particularly in tech, which is reviews. So reviews I don't like. This is what I'm going to do with reviews when I do reviews, is I'm not going to pit several things against each other. I'm going to review individual pieces of technology and say who I think they would be a good fit for, what kind of customer I think should be looking at them. And the reason for this is reviews are based around the entire brand of all of the tech out there. The reviewers have their own biases, but also they've reviewed some of the most expensive and most inaccessible tech, as well as reviewing some of the most budget. And they might do those one after the other. So their reviews of the more budget tech is never going to be as good. They also don't necessarily review tech that's for them. So they're reviewing tech as somebody who has certain likes and dislikes. They're not saying who it would be a good fit for. They're just saying they didn't like it. And also they will review the same TV in the same room for TV reviews, and they're reviewing an 85-inch TV and then they're reviewing a 42-inch TV, and they have very different viewing distances and very different light requirements within the room. So if they're just bringing these things into their house because their company sent them off to them and said review this, they're not going to have the same reviews on both, because they have one house, and everybody I sell TVs to has different houses, and I partly sell for the environment it's going in. So there is that to be aware of, that just because something has good or bad reviews, don't look at the grade they give it. A lot of the time the grade they give it is based on price, which means if it's more expensive it will grade worse, even though maybe it's more expensive for a reason. A lot of time it's based on things that you really you don't need, so the brightness of a screen on something, but you might not need a bright screen for that. And they'll have certain things that they say give something a better review. For example, computers with OLED screens always seem to get better reviews. They're also easier to damage, so they wouldn't be something you would buy for your child. So yeah, I would say generally when reading reviews, you need to steer away from reading them as a whole and seeing what rating it's given it at the end, and read only the bits that matter to you. So if you have a specific need for your phone to be able to take really nice photos, read the reviews on the cameras. Look at comparisons of cameras on different phones. But if you need it to be, if you need a certain feature, look at the reviews on that feature. But don't read the review as a whole and look at the grading it's been given, because it's been graded, whether intentionally or not. Because the reviewer has reviewed so many different pieces of tech, it has been graded relative to some of the most expensive pieces of tech in the world. And it shouldn't be, because realistically, if you're looking at spending under £500 on a television, or under £200 on a phone, or under 20 quid on a speaker, you do not want that reviewer to have also reviewed something incredibly expensive on that same day, because it will make the thing that you want to buy sound worse. And it also just doesn't make you feel good about buying that thing. So it's important to understand that what you want to read is the reviews on the specific feature that's important to you, and not the review on the TV as a whole, or the phone as a whole, or the speaker as a whole. Because I've done that. I've bought the TV that I know is right for me, as somebody who works with tech and who fixes tech. And its reviews are terrible. It has terrible reviews, because people are all recommending to buy the next model up. Now, the next model up would not have fitted in the place that I put it in. It's too big. It doesn't come in a smaller size. The next model up is a type of screen that I find gives me a headache, and I do not like it. The next model up is incredibly bright, and definitely if I had to fit something in a space it didn't really fit in, and I'm sitting a little bit too close to it, it being bright is not an upgrade, that is a downgrade. So there are a whole list of reasons why the reviews are not always reviewing something that's good for you. They're reviewing something that is good in a very generic environment. So that is the end of the video. So I will do a few more. I think probably next time what I will be doing is specifically shopping for TVs, because I seem to be veering very much towards talking about TVs in this one. And we'll go from there. So hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to making more videos.